Hello, this is Debbie, and this is Light Up Your Worth. And I am so excited to have you meet today's guest, Natasha Sattler. And she's the author of the funniest book title I've ever heard of, Shit Adults Never Taught Us. And I have to tell you that when I heard the name of this and I was listening to her podcast, I'm always laughing because her stories, her journey of what she takes you down with her conversations always they make me laugh because they're so true. In fact, this so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that tends to be most people's reaction is it's funny, but then also like heartbreaking and relatable. And I mean, I make all of the stuff that we've completely ignored in life funny because we have to learn it somehow, right? But nobody wants to learn about taxes in the boring way we all are
Right,
accustomed to.
all this adulting stuff. In fact, I was going to tell you guys more about her was that, she's been called to writing as a passion. It's been very understated throughout her life. She was raised out in Maryland, and she always wanted to see creative endeavors. And really, she's just done a lot in a short period of time. Really, she has an amazing bio about how she was able to go through school, and she really always focused on what she was doing. And as a writer, and how you've been in down in LA, just really making a difference in traveling. And I'm not reading her bio word for word because it's so beautiful. But what I was so excited about to talk about today was that, and we were just talking, was even on your social media, it was funny this week, right? Like this week you were asking about like, why do we teach kids in fifth grade how to, you guys were doing line dancing.
We did line dancing, square dancing, but people have commented they learned polka. They learned there were all these different types of dances, and I'm like, there's nothing more awkward than a kid who's like prepubescent, has no idea really how to use their body, line dancing and square dancing and having to like dance for some reason in a group. It makes no sense. And then I was also raised Jewish, and so I did the bar and bat mitzvah circuit, which meant even more awkward dancing at a more awkward age of like 12, 13-ish. And no child should be subjected to this. Why on earth did we have to do this? And then why did we have to learn these like physical education things that were completely pointless and irrelevant to life, but not anything on mental health?
Right. That's what's just so funny. I've been really thinking about this too. Like, why did I learn square dancing in fifth grade? Like,
Right?
why would they have built, honestly, like as an adult now, having raised children, why did they learn it? Like,
Has it ever come up in your life?
No, I've
No.
never thought about it. In fact, but I can remember who my fifth grade partner was.
Yeah. I
Because you had those awkward.
steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you thought, well, maybe we'll learn it as an adult. I don't
know. Not a single moment of my life have I used that. But I do think if we look at suicide rates of kids, they're going up. And for some reason, we're still teaching square dancing and not mental health. It's very confusing to me.
Right. And I've watched stuff too, where there's, where's this town? It's somewhere in the Midwest, where this town has actually incorporated stuff to address that in their, it's almost like a case study. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's where they actually teach kids mindfulness.
Good. There's a lot of schools that have taken meditation and mindfulness and incorporated that into the classroom. I think that's fantastic. We do physical education for most of our K through 12 schooling. And that's fantastic. Everybody should have physical education background, but I learned how to run pretty quickly. I don't need to learn how to run every year or like time if I get faster. I'm growing. Of course I got faster. My legs got longer. I just think physical education, yes, is important, but it has to be integrated with mental education. And if we're not doing both, there's no point in doing just one, because nobody is ever going to only need one thing.
Right. And I think that's where it falls into what we talk about here, all the spiritual journeys, is that really addressing the whole person. as a whole. We're a
Yeah.
spiritual being, we're a physical being, we're intellectual being. And so in order to really develop in your whole spiritual aspect, you really have to have good mental health.
Yeah. That's the only way. It doesn't, I've lived 32 years. I have yet to find a way around having a healthy mental health system and coping practices and navigating depression and anxiety moments. That's there is no way around that to being happy. You have to figure that stuff out first.
Yes, you do. We were talking about too about the whole different um uh our age differences, right? Our whole generational, right? Like this whole thing with millennials, which I actually love millennials, raise them. And so I'm pretty attached to them.
Yeah,
And
we're cool. We're a cool group.
a very cool group. And I think I learned a lot through Simon Sinek.
Mm-hmm.
And when he does a lot of talks about it. And so from the very beginning, I can remember hearing, oh, you're going to have more millennials in the workplace by this year, right? And that was probably 5 years ago. And they said in 7 years. So I was like,
Okay.
okay. So then in working in these all these different generationals, um, what I've noticed too, and what we started to talk about was this whole burnout that's already happening with millennials.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about the information coming at us all of the time, right? So our emails are constantly dinging until from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. We are expected to be accessible and on. You're expected to answer your Slack and your email and your phone and be constantly on call. Where the generation above, if you weren't home, sorry, you weren't home. Like, oh well, couldn't get a hold of them. They ran out to dinner. And so you got breaks. Millennials don't get breaks. And then beyond that, any breaks that we've incorporated into our lives are usually images through social media or watching YouTube or watching television or all of these things where we are now comparing ourselves to other people's best selves. So if you're looking at social media is everybody's 15 minutes of fame. It's their best version of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you're comparing all the shit you went through today, all the worst moments of your day, with everyone else's best moments of their day. So not only are you burnt out from being expected to work all of the time, but you're also burnt out by comparing yourself and all of the expectations you feel like you're not living up to with everyone else just exceeding and excelling. And it's an unfair comparison, I think. And
Yeah.
we're expected to I don't know the proper way to like phrase it without sounding mean, but we're like expected to be perfect all of the time. And if you're not perfect and you don't know something or you have to ask a question, then you're suddenly labeled as less than, or you think you're stupid, and then that contributes to mental health illness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what's so interesting is that I can remember when the cell phones came out, right? I was working in tech and I had a high pressure job in tech, had a team of people who worked for me. And I would go on I can remember a very specific vacation. We went on a houseboat trip and I had to go into the marina every day and use their phone
Yeah.
to call and check in.
Yeah.
And that felt stressful, right? And that was, my gosh, over 20 years ago, right? There was no handheld or I don't think we had our first cell phone yet at home, right? We were early adopters. We got cell phones, but um, at some point during my professional career, I could see it changing, but we were expected to be on call at certain things, you know, couldn't schedule vacations at certain times of the year, depending on what was happening. But as the phones and the email systems, I can remember doing email when email first came. I mean, I sound like I'm 100, but I'm only 55, right?
No, and it
And
progressed slowly, right? Because to check your email at one point, you had to disconnect your phone and you had to spend 15 minutes listening to an AOL beep dial up. And
mhm,
there was so many steps to it. And now there are no steps. It comes to you. It happens to you. Your phone
yes,
dings and says, "Hey, I have an email." And that's uh there's no boundary there.
Yes.
It's uncensored. There's absolutely no boundary between you having to do something. It just comes to you.
Yeah. And it's really interesting how you talk about the expectations. Like they're super unreasonable, right? Because even now, I can remember working 60, 80-hour work weeks a lot of my career. But when I would leave, eventually leave work,
Mm-hmm.
I was off.
Yes. The second you got home, you were done.
I was done.
And that's not true anymore. Now you're on from when you wake up till you go to bed. And beyond that, there are all these things that we've been given that are like, this is going to make your life easier, right? There are a million apps where it's like, oh, well, now it's an app on your phone. The problem with that is that now it's an app on your phone. Your phone is everywhere with you. And this concept of it's easier. It's just going to make your life easier means it's going to make you more accessible to the rest of the world. So yeah, Slack and Google Drive and all of these things are just apps on your phone. And that is true. But then there's no excuse for why you can't do something right away, like right
Mm-hmm.
now. And the excuse of, well, I have a life, I have to go do something doesn't seem to work anymore.
Yeah. Like you didn't used to, even just a couple of years, say 5 years ago, if you got a text, you could just get back to them whenever, right?
Right.
People didn't expect you to respond right away to your text.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've noticed that too. Like even close friends or people expect a response.
Yeah. And honestly, it's what's making businesses function. So I'm not saying don't do it because businesses function based on speed now. And if you're delayed, then they're just going to go somewhere else because everything is expected immediately. Prime shipping is 2 days. If you ship something longer than that, or if it isn't free or it isn't part of our new society, then people are going to go find the thing that does fit with what they're used to. So we are expected of all of these things, but then we're expected to navigate them and then maintain sanity and not burn out. And all of those things can't go together.
Right. Right. So what what have you used in this whole super, unreasonable expectations of what's happening? I mean, do you have strategies that you are using to help that you
Absolutely.
would recommend for people?
I think there's a number of things. I think boundaries are important. So the book Shit Adults Never Taught Us is broken up into 4 sections. The first section is career and money, and it's all the stuff we ignored in school, like taxes and savings and retirement accounts. But then it's also knowing when to leave a job and keeping yourself sustainable without doing that burnout thing and all of the career and money stuff that just we didn't see coming. The next section is relationships, and it's setting boundaries in relationships as well. It goes through romantic relationships, but then also siblings, parents, making friends as an adult, like all the relationships that span your adult life. And then the third section is mind, which contains everything that involves mental health, not just the diagnosable stuff, such as anxiety and depression, but also overthinking and just all the little catastrophic thoughts that come into our head throughout our day. And then the last section is life, which is managing things such as your privacy and asking questions and knowing what's worth settling for and what's not. So those are the 4 sections. And then within those, I do break out like the setting of boundaries is important because having a community is important because meditation and anxiety coping techniques are important because, and all of those things lead to managing the expectations of you and not comparing yourself to everybody else or the facade that everybody else has put on.
Yeah, that's so true. That whole overthinking. Earlier today, I was having a conversation with a colleague, and we were talking about the almost the exact same thing about, people are putting on this facade about what they're doing, like coaching, for
Yeah.
instance, or energy healing, and that they're at this certain point level. And that's actually not the truth
No.
of what's happening. But yet that's what we're seeing.
What is happening versus what is expected versus what we all think is going on are all completely different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I've seen a lot of with not only millennials, right? But because I've seen it in our own families, is that, and I think my sister and I have even had this conversation about, is that there's such a higher level of anxiety and depression
Yeah. And you can see it starting younger and younger too.
Mm-hmm.
And that is more concerning, I think, than the levels. There are new testing techniques, and there are so many things that go into our lives now that potentially that was always there, but we're just now more willing to talk about it. People are more open. There are more doctors focused on this, so maybe the statistics are a little bit higher because of these factors. But you're now seeing a lot younger generations impacted, and that I do think has a lot to do with social media.
I think so too. I think when you just see that other people are perfect, when you can't figure out what you want to do, and I have these conversations with my son, is that, oh, the expectations that I should be doing this by this time and this time. And I think, you know what? Actually, we had some of the same expectations. Oh, I'm going to be married by 22 or 24, some ridiculous young age, right?
Yeah.
And and then, I'm going to have a house by blah, 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 or 2.1 kids by, however you get a point of a kid. I don't know still, but.
And then all of that is also contributed into a financial system that doesn't exist anymore. So millennials are looking at their parents being like, okay, well, they had, this job and this house and this life by this age. But then their parents didn't go through a recession and a pandemic within the first 10 years of their working life. And their parents didn't have inflation at 10% every year. Their parents didn't have a housing market that's jumping 20% every year. There's so many contributing factors. They also had different retirement options, and companies offer different benefits like relocation packages, which are rare now, matching 401ks, which are rare now. So all of these things that were benefits once upon a time led to those expectations. We're now in jeopardy of Social Security even being a thing by the time we retire. So buying a house, like a lot of my generation, and especially the people that live in cities, just go, why bother? Like, what is the point there? We have different life goals.
Yeah, which is what's so interesting about that too, is that I did not follow my generation's, normal path.
Yeah.
I was a single mom. I never married his father, even though I spent 20 years with him. It's before the time, I guess. And
yeah, that's cool now.
Now it's like what everybody does, but that wasn't what I wanted, by the way. I wanted to be married, and I wanted us to get a house. And in the end, I ended up buying my first house. Well, all my houses actually that I've bought by myself, because I was single. And so I didn't do that. I didn't go to school right out of high school. I had some really good times, right? Saw a lot of rock concerts and wore a lot of spandex and leather pants. I can tell you that. I was more the wild, right? It wasn't too wild, but I didn't do that. I didn't start working on my degree really until I was like 25. 23 to 25. I became a mom in there, and then I'm like, okay, I better get my shit together, right?
And
started working on my college degree for 15 years. Yeah.
How many times have you had that thought though of like, I need to get my shit together? Because it comes in stages. There's never a moment where you're like, I have to get my shit together, and then you do, and then life just goes smooth forever and ever. That's a constant evolving. We always have to get our shit together, right? There's always something different that we have to do. And some of those aspects did get easier, right? Like buying a house, you can now do it from an app. Investing in the stock market, you can now do it from an app. There's direct deposit. There are things that did get easier.
There is. Yes.
There are just some things that when they got easier, we were expected to level up with them. Our lives didn't get easier with the things getting easier.
Right. And I remember thinking, if we could only do this or do that, like last week, it was my night to cook dinner, and I didn't have a clue. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to get? What am I going to order? Right.
Yeah. You just order it from a phone and it just shows up.
Order it, and there's some food, right? Or the groceries or gifts, or
nice.
It's just been so nice. But yeah, I think about it and like, what did I give up? If I was struggling to meet the expectations of my generation, right? All that comparison, I really can't imagine now. It's all over social, where you are comparing where you are now against this. And I can see why the drinking has gone up, the the really the anxiety of that being even more behind the eight ball, you know.
Well, it's because everything bleeds together, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
thought, I need groceries delivered, I need food delivered, and it all happens within 2 or 3 hours. So you think, oh, this is the speed at which I expect things to happen. And so when like we forget the other person is at, there's a person at the other end of that. There's a person who brought you groceries, there's a person who brought you food, there's a person who delivered your packages, several. They packaged it up at Amazon or whatever, they put it on a truck, that truck drove, like all those things had to happen that all involved people. But we forget because it's services, so everybody that's working is now just seen as a service. So whatever your job is, it's more, you're expected to perform it more immediately, for the simple fact that that's just the society we're in now. Things are happening much faster.
Yeah. And I'm kind of deciding I don't want to be so much in that personally. I
Yeah,
mean, but
but
how do you navigate that?
it's now societal, so it's harder. We now have to just navigate ourselves and navigate
Mm-hmm.
our boundaries and our own, take care of ourselves. And I think gratitude is a really good way, where you recognize that there is a person on the other end of all the things you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're able to recognize that, then eventually that will spread around, and the expectations of you, hopefully, as long as a community we support each other, will match the expectations of everything around. So as a community, if we support each other, then you have the support of, I need to take a break, and other people are there to help.
Yeah. Yeah. It really takes a community to really help each other. I think there's a lot to be said too of, you know, you don't really understand what somebody else is going through. So maybe that person who
Yeah.
just delivered my dinner last week, right? Like I paused and they're so taking the picture and running to get to the next thing. And I'm pause and I yell out, thank you. You
Yeah.
know, they look so shocked, right? Like, oh,
Well, they forget about the people as well, because they're task oriented and they're going, okay, I have to get 3 deliveries out in this hour, and they're on a time. Everything is on a deadline now, whether we've even noticed it or not. If you waited a day to text your friend back, you're like, oh, sorry. You're like immediately apologetic because it took a long time. But 30 years ago, nobody was like, I didn't get a letter from that person in a few days. Like, we just, we expect things so much faster now.
yeah. Yeah. And I wonder too, like, so say, you know, if my audience is primarily middle age, right, 40 plus,
Mm-hmm.
then actually probably more like 45, 55, 60 is primarily my audience. And so a lot of us have children, really your age group, right, or younger.
Yeah.
And so if in our cases, right, like if we're trying to guide an adult through the shit that we didn't teach them because we didn't realize that we needed to teach them some of the
Well, you
things, right?
couldn't, you couldn't have. There's no way you could have taught. The book is not to shame teachers or parents.
Yes.
It was never intended that way. The
Yeah.
book is to say there's a lot that technology and society has done since we were raised, and now we have to learn how to do things for the modern times.
Yeah.
And it's just written in quick, witty, funny chapters, because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise it would be a little bit sad.
Well, yeah, and you're quick and witty, so that makes sense, you know. And so
Oh, thank you.
you know, I've really embraced like where the things that my son or my nieces and my nephews are really good at, right? Like, oh, well, what do you do for this? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, blah 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 blah, right? Like, I had somebody text me or message me last night about, hey, you could try face yoga, and I was
Huh.
like, oh, never heard of
Okay.
face yoga, right? Like it's gonna laugh. When my niece told me about like you know, the whole thing, like, oh, don't wash your hair every day, right? Like
Yeah.
we were taught to wash our hair every day. Well, then now that switches over, right? Things change, something
Yeah.
random, and you know, learned about dry shampoo. And I'm like, dry shampoo's been around since the 50s, apparently. And you know, I thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread, right?
Well, but
But
now there's so much information. We are so inundated with content
right?
that if you look it up, the first article is going to say don't wash your hair every day. The next article is going to say wash it twice a day. The third article is going to say never wash it. Like, and you don't know who to trust because everybody seems equally reputable. So that's why I'm like, make your own decisions. Ask questions, talk to people in your life that you trust, and then try stuff. make your own decisions.
Yeah, it's so true. The I always think of things too where my son will compare himself to where I was when I was his age.
Oh yeah.
And I
But
have to
different
tell him,
lives.
I didn't know what I was doing either at that age. Why?
Yeah.
I have no expectations that you've got it all figured out. Heck, we're all still trying to figure it out, right? Or life events happen, right? Like who would have predicted a pandemic?
Yeah.
Like you could have had
And
it all figured out.
and no one does. No one has it figured out. That's the thing. No one has it figured out. Some people are just better at pretending.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I remember I was just reading a post yesterday on somebody too about to learn what what their expertise was in. And it's like, when you get to this point in life, like midlife, a lot of us are like, okay, now what do I want to be when I grow up? Right. It actually flashes back to when you're younger. What did I
Yeah.
really enjoy when I was younger? And trying to keep everything in perspective. Like, does this really matter? Does it really
Right.
matter? Or I know some of the comparison too, I think for any age is important. We see their best moments of their day.
Right. And it's not, doesn't matter now. It's like, will it matter in a year? Does it matter when I wake up tomorrow? Because there are things that matter so much right now because of the headspace we're in, the circumstances around us, the people
Mm-hmm.
influencing us. But when you take a step back, does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? Will it matter in a month? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what matters.
One of the things I've tried too is that, I look at what somebody else has and I think to myself, do I even want that? Like,
Right. Yeah.
I think about the flip side, the adulting part of something, right? Like, oh yeah, you got this gorgeous house and I love to be at the house. It's gorgeous, right? But I just think of, wow, the mortgage on this must be really high.
Yeah.
Like I've had
And
that high mortgage. I don't want that.
it's what's important to different people.
Mm-hmm.
Like comparing ourselves to other people doesn't necessarily mean that we want what they want or that they want what we want. It's all, everybody's doing stuff differently. And recognizing that is so important.
Oh, that is so important. I think that's a really big takeaway for people to hear again is that you have to understand, yeah, we all want different things.
We all want different things. And if you're projecting what you want onto somebody else, they're just going to disappoint you. That's true in relationships too. Like
Mm-hmm.
you were saying, like your son's father, he didn't want to get married, you did. And recognizing that sometimes people just want different things can save people time. Having those conversations that we're too afraid to have tend to lead us towards answers we didn't even know we were asking the questions
Yeah.
for. I think one good thing that has come out of the generation that gets inundated with content and social media all the time is that we're given topics to think about that nobody thought about before.
Yeah.
We're asking different questions.
Yeah. And I love that the questions are being asked.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like, why didn't we ask that? Why didn't I ever question certain things? It was
We
just
don't
how it
know.
was.
We don't know what we don't know, right? So we
Yeah.
don't know what to ask.
Yeah.
If no one is talking about it, it seems like it's a topic that doesn't hold any weight. So why bother? Or you talk about it when it's an emergency or it's urgent, right? We talk
Yeah.
about the problems when we're in a relationship, we're in the middle of a screaming match. Like we don't talk about all the moments that led up to them. So once you get better communication skills, then you can talk about things before they get to the screaming match.
Yeah. Yeah. It really goes back to even like the setting the expectations of understanding even some of our own basic stuff, like our own basic values, like what's truly important to you, not
Yeah.
what's on somebody else's account, but what's truly important to you. Like I can look at like you're in your setting, right? You have your
Mm-hmm.
exercise bike and there's
Yeah.
looks like a yoga, not a yoga, but
Mm-hmm.
like a meditation kind of mat or a yoga.
Yep.
And there's a map of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So already I'm like, okay, she likes to travel. I mean, granted, I've read your bio, right?
Yeah.
Um, and but I can see she likes to travel. You want to exercise. That's important to you. And then you have like a backpack. So it's like simple, practical. I got what I need if I need to go. I
Yeah.
can like just grab this and go.
There's a line in the book that says, don't peek into a window and assume you're seeing the whole house,
Mm-hmm.
which is a metaphor that's perfect for people as well. You see a picture of them on social media and you think you see the whole them. You don't. Get to know the person. There's a whole person behind that picture. There's a whole
Yeah.
personality. There's a whole past. There's everything that they think throughout a day. And the same is true for yourself. Sometimes you look at a moment and you think that this moment will last forever and this is who I am now. And it's not. You are an entire person.
Yeah. Oh, I can so agree with that. I remember thinking that there was moments before that, like, can this moment in time last forever?
Yeah.
And that's just unrealistic, right? Those expectations of I don't think we were taught. So is that, you know, you would always hear the expression if something didn't go quite as right. Oh, well, this too will pass, right? Like time
Yeah.
will heal all wounds. It's not actually the time, it's doing the work to release the stuff that happened in different time frames. But at least
Yep.
that's my perspective.
Well,
And
time is important because
mhm,
things are always going to be the most painful in the moment that they happen and the immediacy after. Time does help give you perspective on things, but you're
mhm,
right, you have to do the work. If you don't do the work, you don't change as a person. And so when you look back, you're exactly the same as you were, which means you're in the exact same place. You
yes,
didn't move.
right. I think getting really clear on what our values are so that when you have those relationships or the work, or you're going to take a look at a job, you're like, okay, what are their expectations? Like, what truly do they value versus what I'm bringing? Does that align with what I
Right.
want to give?
And making sure that they value you and not just the things you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw, of course, another post on LinkedIn last night, and it was about somebody who was a director of marketing at some US company, and she just got some diagnosis, right, of like some type of breast cancer diagnosis, and she was trying to figure out how could she um you know maintain as much as her income coming in, because she was a solo, her husband was
Mm,
starting a business, and that company actually, the CEO heard about it, about how she was trying to figure it out. It's a smaller, probably less than 100 people startup. And they just decided that we're just going to continue to pay you, whether you're homesick that day
yeah.
because of your treatment or not. And I thought, wow, like there are these companies who have compassion and see you more than a service.
Well, there's got to be that humanity behind business, right? Because your business does not run without humans. And yes, some people have similar skills. And when one person leaves, you can replace them with a person with similar skill sets. Every new person brings new energy into a place. So that is true. But valuing your employees as people rather than assets helps your business grow faster and helps clients recognize the good you can do. People care less and less as we continue to move through society. They care less and less about just what you offer in terms of product and more what you offer in terms of experience. That's
Mm-hmm.
become way more important these days. People are now buying shoes based on the values of the company. People are choosing an experience based on the ethics behind it. And so you have to evolve with the world. And that is all based in humanity.
Yeah, that's so true. I just made a big purchase based upon the ethics of a company and my back end software. I moved
Yeah.
from one to another because I like the ethics of the other company, and it was
Yeah.
women owned, right, and women led. And
Yeah.
I thought,
I
oh
love I love that. I love that that's where we're going. I think that's incredible.
yeah, it used to be more sporadic, and now it's just really seems like it's just becoming more of, we want to know who's behind the scenes.
We have to, because otherwise you get these big corporations that forget that there's humans, both employee humans and clients and customers who are humans.
Yeah.
And they're just pumping products out in a marketing standpoint without thinking of the repercussions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're watching all of these congressional hearings where companies have to answer for how did you approach this ethically, and they don't have answers. So we have to do that work. We have to figure out what's ethically aligned before it gets to, well, now we have to recover the damage that's been done.
Yeah, right. I think I remember reading or hearing somewhere along the line where people said, actually having a class in ethics is kind of an oxymoron.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the people who need to actually have ethics, why would they wouldn't even be in the class? Like, why would they?
No, I think the way to have ethics, and this is probably not the way people want to have ethics, is you have to start with gratitude. And most people that don't have that, aren't just inherently grateful, have to kind of fall flat on their face first.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're able to just project gratitude, and there's parts in the book that give you physical, tangible steps and things you can do every day to amplify the gratitude that you see in the world. There are journals you can keep, there are conversations that you can have, there are things that just, it reprograms your mind to come from a grateful place rather than a selfish or what do you serve, what can you give me place.
Mm-hmm.
If you come from it with gratitude, you automatically come from things from an ethical standpoint. But you're right, if you have to teach somebody ethics, the way to teach them that is that they have to fall flat on their face. They have to make mistakes. They have to learn from those mistakes and grow as a person, or they won't ever, it'll all be a facade. It will all be fake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gratitude is, I think, a common theme between I think anybody who's been on the podcast, there is a common theme of the gratitude for the journey of discovering different parts of ourselves and having that perspective, forgiving ourselves.
Yeah,
Gratitude is so powerful.
Well, gratitude is powerful because it starts with you. Once you recognize all the moments of your life that led you here, and you're grateful for everything that you've overcome, everything that you have experienced, all the things that have gotten you to this moment, then you can recognize that in other people, and you can give that humanity and that community support to others. But
yes,
it does have to start with you.
Yeah, gratitude really changes. You could look at things 2 different days when you put the lens on of gratitude, of really being grateful. Like I could use my 20-year relationship that I never got married.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful.
Look
I
at
learned
all that
so
you
much.
learned.
Mm-hmm.
You got a son out of it. You've learned what you do like, what you don't like. You've learned who you are, the things that you need out of a partner and out of your own life. Look at all the things that get you there.
Yeah.
Every bad experience, it teaches you things. Every good experience teaches you things. Every moment of your past has led you to this moment. Like, look at every single thing in your life you learned at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Every single thing. Like, it's not just the physical skills at work. Like, oh, I learned Excel, I learned how to use, Dropbox. These are things that are just skills. But like having grace in a conversation, and maintaining dignity and having ethics, these are all things you learned, just as you learned how to walk and read and write. All the things in your whole life that you do on a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis, you learned at some point. So be grateful for what you are capable of.
Yeah, that really takes a lot too, to be able to have that perspective, to be able to move into it. So I love that your book will help people learn the gratitude. And I think, or what do you think about it's the toughest lessons that we've actually learned the most about ourselves.
And that's why the book is written, is there's a lot of stuff that I learned the hard way, or people in my life have learned the hard way, and nobody has to do the crunchy way through life. You can do the smooth way. So I wrote the book to get ahead of things. Nothing in life that is worth it is easy. So be prepared, do the plan, get the book.
Yeah. Well, and I think people think everything is going to be easy, right? Especially when they think about, those spiritual people, they just, most people find spirituality because of something tough in life. And you're trying to figure out coping. Like, how am I going to cope? How am I going to feel better?
You're doing the
pain.
work though. And spirituality is doing the work on yourself. You're never going to easily do work on yourself.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. It's not like anybody would willingly step into like, oh yeah, I'm going to go through a heartbreak that's going to take me 5 years to get over, right? Or
Right.
that dream job. I work so hard.
Nobody wants to examine and see all the stuff that they spend all day ignoring about themselves and like sidestepping. Doing the work and becoming a more spiritual person is looking at all the parts of yourself that you have ignored for a long time.
Yeah, it's really, or you worked, like you can look at your beautiful journey that you've had, and then you wake your way up to the perfect dream job that you've thought about since you were 12.
Yeah.
And then you get it and you're like, oh, I thought it was something else.
and then you change.
Yeah.
Then we change, we pivot.
Yeah, I think that's like the word of the generation too, right? Pivot. And that pivoting is actually a healthy thing.
It's not bad. It sounds like, oh, I'm giving up everything I've worked for. You're not. Everything you worked for is still there. All the work you did to get to wherever you were going is still there. You're just changing path. A train doesn't go 5 miles and then change course the last mile and have to start all the way back at the beginning. It still went the 5 miles. It's just now changing direction to where it's finishing.
So true. So true. So much insight. I hope everybody picks up your book. Shit's adults never taught us.
It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the places you guys buy books. It's easy to find.
So if they're interested in reaching out to you, or I know you have your podcast.
Yeah.
Also.
So Shit Adults Never Taught Us is the name of both the book and the podcast. And it's also the Instagram handle. So you can always direct message me or anything at Shit Adults Never Taught Us.
Yeah. It's great stuff too. I love following your page.
Thank you.
Because it's so real, right? Like,
yeah.
I still want to know, why did I learn square dancing?
No idea.
Like, I don't know who to go ask, right? Like, I think if there's some school educators, they need to tell us.
Yes, please put it in the comments, people. We need to know.
We need to know. It's one of those questions. It actually came up on my meditation, for goodness sake. I'm like, I can't, I'm an overthinker, apparently. I'm like, why did we learn?
Aren't we all? These things are the things that I stay awake thinking at night.
Yeah. And then write a really funny book with practical tips.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, I hope you guys catch our podcast too. I really enjoy them, and they give me perspective, and it does put a thought in my mind, and it takes me a while to shake it, right? Because I'm like, I never even thought about that. I just kind of went along.
That's what the whole thing was. The book is 98 super quick 2 to 3 page chapters of just how to get your shit together, and then the podcast dives a little bit deeper into topics that either were or were not included in the book but just deserve more time. And so each of the episodes is about half an hour. The first season was 10 episodes, and it involves, sexism, workplace harassment. It also involves branding yourself and noticing yourself as a brand. We talk about all sorts of things. And then season 2 we're going into more raw, vulnerable stuff I'm doing the first episode of season 2 some point in March, and then it will go until May.
Oh, and I'm looking forward to those. Guys. Yeah, they should be fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, and for everybody here listening. Don't forget to pick up her book, Shit Adults Never Taught Us, and let her know that this is where you found her. And
yeah, tell me what you think. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, just love the feedback, because you just never know. You could end up being an episode where she's talking about or on the social media, right? Of a question like, well, what about this?
Yeah, we'll keep it real for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.